What if I told you that Thailand was never colonized? That sounds insane, right? But it's actually a very fascinating story, because when people think of Southeast Asia, they often picture these European powers arriving to the region, taking territories, drawing borders. But that's not the case with Siam, or as we know it now as Thailand. So yeah, if you look at the map of Southeast Asia, you probably see these red, yellow, and blue lines between these empires that ruled and dominated the region for quite a while. For example, you get France colonizing Vietnam, Cambodia and Laos, the British colonizing Burma and Malaysia, the Dutch dominating Indonesia, of course the Spanish dominating the Philippines as well for more than 300 years. But I kid you not, in the middle of all of this, there was one kingdom that actually stood independent. And we know that kingdom today by the name of Thailand. Yeah, when you think about it, Siam, or as known as Thailand now, was not really protected by mountains or geography. It didn't have a good army or a massive army, and it wasn't even richer than its neighbors. But sadly, by the 1800s, it found itself trapped in between two of the biggest empires of all time, France and Britain. So again, why wasn't it conquered? And the answer is not really simple that they wanted a buffer zone in between the kingdoms or something. It was actually the clever diplomacy of their king and a very sad and hard compromises. So to understand what happened, you actually need to understand why Europe came to the region in the first place. Because by the beginning of the 19th century, Southeast Asia became one of the most valuable places on Earth. It was a gemstone for anyone to get. Yeah, it was just a big cake that anyone could just grab a piece of. Back then, Europe was not just exploring. It was dominating, seeking control. Because the Industrial Revolution has transformed these empires. Right? Factories needed raw materials like timber, tin, rubber, rice, and spices. And with their growing populations, they wanted these manufactured goods in their markets constantly. So yeah, simply colonies were not really a symbol of control back then. They were essential to keep the European economy going. And back then, Southeast Asia, unfortunately, was one of the most vulnerable places on the planet, because it sat between two of the largest markets in the world, still the largest markets actually, India and China, and controlled the busiest trade routes in the region, or maybe in the world. So any empire that could dominate these waterways will simply protect its trade, assert dominance, and heavily weaken its enemies. So Britain made the first move. It gradually took over Malaysia, Singapore, to control simply the Straits of Malacca. If you don't know the Straits of Malacca, it's a very important shipping route in Southeast Asia, something sort of like the Panama Canal or the Suez Canal. So yeah, you get the idea. Very crucial, very important. And if you control that, you pretty much control the whole thing. Then after that, they went to take over the Burmese kingdom, or as we know it today as Myanmar, bringing its empire to the west of Siam, or Thailand as we know it now. While the French, on the other hand, they looked to the east and they took over countries such as Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, creating the so-called French Indochina. And by the end of the 19th century, French territories stretched all the way to the Siam's eastern borders. So within few years, Siam found itself surrounded. Britain to the west, France to the east. And you probably know that most countries that find themselves trapped in between two of the biggest empires in the world will eventually disappear. But Siam's king realized that he cannot win on the battlefield. He saw all his neighbors lose, and he understood that this war cannot be fought with swords and guns, but with diplomacy. The future of his kingdom will not depend on winning wars, but just talking to his rivals and try to get them to please just not attack. Now let's talk about Siam, or Thailand, before the Europeans arrived, because it was one of the strongest kingdoms in Southeast Asia. Its modern history began in 1782 when King Rama I founded the Chakri dynasty. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. It was established in Bangkok as the new capital after the destruction of the old one by the Burmese just 15 years earlier. From this new capital, the kingdom gradually started to rebuild its economy, its army, and its political influence. Unlike modern countries, which are pretty much defined by borders, Siam did not control territories the way countries control their territories nowadays. It ruled through a network of tributary states. And what that means is smaller kingdoms would recognize the King of Siam as their ruler and pay tributes, simply to receive protection and not be invaded, while still governing themselves. Very flexible. This system has worked for centuries, but of course that would definitely clash with the European idea of territories or land belonging to one country at a time, with fixed borders. So by the early 1800s, Siam was a regional power. It influenced parts of modern-day Laos, Cambodia, northern Malaysia, while competing, of course, with Burma and Vietnam for dominance over land in Southeast Asia. But despite its strength, Siam faced a serious problem. The kingdom didn't develop. It has been operating the way it has operated for centuries. For example, its army relied on traditional methods. Transportation was slow, and many government institutions have changed little by little over time. Meanwhile, Europe was entering the Industrial Revolution. Steam-powered ships and advanced rifles and guns gave the Europeans, of course, huge advantage over other armies in the world, and that's basically the reason behind their dominance all across Africa, Southeast Asia, or other colonies in Latin America. Guns made the whole game different. Navies couldn't stand a chance against these steam-powered ships with cannons on top of them. The news has been spreading of them expanding all over the world, and it was a matter of time until they come to your door and be like, knock knock. So Siam needed a leader that will know how to preserve it without going to wars with these empires, and there is no way of preserving it with guns but talking, diplomacy. In 1851, a new king came to power, King Mongkut or Rama IV. When he took this throne of Siam, he understood that Europe couldn't simply be ignored. And I kid you not, before becoming king, Mongkut or Rama IV had been a monk for 27 years. And during that time he met Christian missionaries, studied English, learned Western science, geography, and mathematics. So that gave him a better understanding of how European powers thought and operated. And he realized something that none of the other kingdoms realized, that basically the biggest threat to Siam isn't really just being colonized by European armies, but being left behind when it comes to technology and development. And just after 4 years of becoming king, a British diplomat named Sir John Bowring arrived to Siam, because simply Britain wanted access to Siam's markets and pushed trade agreements. And in 1855, they signed what is known as the Bowring Treaty, and I hope I'm not pronouncing that wrong as well. And of course, that for Britain, that was a huge victory, because British merchants gained the right to trade freely, import and export, taxes were reduced, and most importantly, British citizens living in Siam cannot be trialed in Siamese courts, and they can get away with whatever they do there because they get judged by British law, not by Siamese law. Many historians consider this to be a very unequal treaty, and actually it was the case with most of Britain's colonies, or the territories that didn't even colonize, has to benefit greatly from these places. If you don't want to be colonized, then you gotta pay. But the king understood, in order to keep Siam's sovereignty, he has to give Britain special privileges, because simply rejecting Britain risks war. Accepting their treaty will preserve the kingdom, and he chose to compromise. It wasn't a popular decision. Siam simply gave up potent legal and economic powers. But unlike China, that was forced to agree to these unequal treaties after the Opium Wars, Siam managed to negotiate rather than surrender after a military defeat. Mongkut knew that Siam wanted just to survive, And for him, signing an unfavorable treaty was definitely better than just losing the entire nation. And that decision brought the kingdom something priceless: time. Time to reorganize, time to rethink, time to basically plan the future of the kingdom with these European colonies all over the place. When King Mongkut died in 1868, his son, King Chulalongkorn, excuse my Thai pronunciation, took over, and he was named, of course, Rama V. He inherited a kingdom surrounded by danger. And I kid you not, he was only 15 years old when he inherited the kingdom. And that guy, he transformed Siam to something that no other rulers did. Rama V, he understood the harsh reality of these colonial powers. And he understood simply that they would have an excuse colonizing these countries, calling them uncivilized or poorly governed. And that gives them this excuse to just come over and just dominate and treat these countries way worse than they were poorly governed or when they were uncivilized. And he knew if Siam wanted independence, it had to prove that it's a modern nation, that it could govern itself. Unbelievable. So he began a whole series of sweeping reforms, replacing the old system of powerful local elites with this centralized administration in Bangkok to modern ministries, improved the legal system, expanded education, built railways and telegraph lines, and strengthened the country's infrastructure heavily. Also, Rama V was invested in more of a professional army, and he encouraged members of his royal family to go study in Europe. He believed that Siam needed to learn from the West in order to understand the West without becoming dominated by it. Also, one of his most significant achievements was the abolishment of slavery. Back then in Siam was different from the plantation slavery we've seen in America. Still is crucial to modernize the image of Siam. But of course, modernization alone will not save the kingdom from the mischief empires around it. Britain and France, of course, were expanding and were growing a massive interest into Siam. Even though it's been modernizing, it's been reforming, but yeah, I mean, we all know it's not about that, is it? So Siam still remained trapped in the middle of these competing two empires. And within a few years, Siam was yet to face one of the greatest crises that will happen to it, and it could have made it lose its independence forever. So by the 1890s, and despite all the reforms King Rama V made, the future of the kingdom will not be decided in Bangkok but in Paris. Since the French already conquered Vietnam and Cambodia, the only thing that was separating these colonies was, of course, the Kingdom of Siam. The French argued that Laos, which back then was under the Siamese kingdom, rightfully belonged to French Indonesia. Let that sink in for a second. And of course, Siam strongly disagreed. You're just a white colonizer. You're coming from the other part of the world. You don't even have a right to this land. And they insisted that the Lao kingdoms have been paying their tributes to Siam for generations. And of course, the dispute quickly escalated. It's France. In 1893, the French sailed to the Chao Phraya River towards Bangkok. As they approached, the Siamese forts opened fire. But of course, they were no match for the French Navy. The ships easily broke through their defenses and anchored just a few kilometers away from the Grand Palace. And this was the first time Siam felt it's about to become a French colony or another European colony. And the French, of course, gave the ultimatum. Siam had to surrender all of its territories east of the Mekong River, which is basically most of modern-day Laos, pay compensation, and accept the French occupation to the territories, till the demand was met. So King Rama V faced an impossible choice. If he fights France, he would lose the entire kingdom, or give up a huge portion of the kingdom's territories to the French. So he simply chose to just give up the territories. And to many Siamese people, back then they were called Siamese people, not Thai, well, that felt like a national humiliation. Thousands of square kilometers was just simply cut off from their kingdom by foreign occupiers without even a major war or any military conflict. But the king believed that sacrificing was worth more than fighting, because the preservance of the kingdom is more important than just losing it. As many people looked down on him back then, history has proved him right. Because unlike Vietnam, Cambodia, or Burma, Siam actually survived. It survived as a sovereign state, despite its losing territories. And this was a painful victory, but still a victory if you think about it. But the message was clear. Modernization alone will not protect you. You need military, you need armies to protect you. Now, what's the price of independence? Till today, Thailand still celebrates being one of the only countries in mainland Southeast Asia that was not colonized. And technically that's true. No European flags ever flew over Bangkok. No British or French governors ruled over the kingdom. The Chakri dynasty remained in power, and Siam retained its sovereignty while all its neighbors were colonized. To avoid conquest, Siam simply gave up Laos to the French, gave up parts of Cambodia as well, and transferred 4 Malay states to the British influence under the Anglo-Siamese Treaty. By sacrificing outer territories, Siam preserved its political heart. Some people believe that Siam has earned a mastery in diplomacy. Some, of course, argue that it wasn't even independent at all. Unequal treaties, foreign powers of course enjoyed special privileges, and of course Britain and France hold enormous influence over the kingdom. In other words, Siam has escaped former colonization, but it didn't really escape imperial pressure. And I think that's what makes Thailand's story unique. Because it didn't survive because it had a powerful army or strong geography or luck. It survived because its kings were smart enough to understand they can never win militarily. And it survived until today. As we know it, it's one of the most beautiful touristic destinations of all time, Thailand. Thailand is a clear example that survival does not necessarily mean war or fighting, but maybe you can get out of it with diplomacy. It's not that they were strong, it's not that the British or the French were kind, and of course it's not like Europe was not interested in the Thai markets or the Siam markets. It survived because of a combination of visionary leaders, modernization, and of course painful compromises, and the perfect timing of kings recognizing the threat before it came, the adaptation to the rapidly changing world around them. It became smaller, but existing until now. And yes, it did remain as the one nation in Southeast Asia that was never formally colonized. And you might be thinking everybody should fight colonizers and all of that, but in that case, when you see an enemy come into your shores with weapons that you can never outmatch them, you see all your neighbors being colonized, being subjugated, and taken over. It's better to seek diplomacy. It's better to just sit and talk rather than fighting back. And to be honest, the British and the French didn't spare anyone. Of course they didn't spare Siam, but Siam's rulers were just smart enough to know that this is not a fair game. They will eventually lose. And due to their smart decision and painful compromises, Thailand is now one of the most beautiful places on the planet, a flourishing economy, and it was and still remains the only Southeast Asian country that was never colonized. Well, thanks. Thank you for today's video, and I hope you learned something. I'll see you in the next one. You stay cool, yo.